I think that one of the biggest questions that you're going to be asked or everyone's going to be looking for this summer is, do you try to make sure that this team improves drastically for next year, or is this going to be a slow build? Are you going to use the draft picks at the draft, or are you going to trade them for players that you can have in the lineup next year?
That's a fair question. I mean, I think until you get in those conversations with what players are available, what teams are going to be out there, I don't think you're going to see much movement in free agency. Obviously, most guys are getting signed already, so there's not going to be a huge free agent market. So it's going to have to be through trades, and especially as the draft comes, you'll find out somebody's going to get knocked out early. Someone's not going to be happy. Someone's going to want to make changes. So as we go through and start having those conversations, right now, it's hard to say, are we going to make all the picks? Right now, today we are going to make all the picks. But as we get to the draft, hey, can we move up? Is there an opportunity to make a trade for a player that we feel is someone that can help us now and in the future? We're going to look at all those options for sure. But right now, it's like there's not all those names out there. I think people are just gearing up for the playoffs, and the teams that are out of the playoffs are kind of regrouping and, okay, let's evaluate where we went wrong this season and how we're going to kind of get better. And they're going to be doing the same things. And then you're going to have those conversations with the GMs.
But is it safe to say that the biggest goal in your mind is the long-term goal as opposed to making the playoffs next year?
Yeah, I mean, you want to make the playoffs every year. I mean, you're not gonna want us to say it, Eric. You always are like, well, don't say that. But that is always the goal. I don't think one guy probably came in and talked to you and said, we don't want to make the playoffs. No, we want to make the playoffs. I mean, that's always going to be the goal. But we're going to do it the right way. We're not going to just force it to rush to get rid of the whatever pick we are, 1 to 6. We're not giving that up just to. Well, I mean, again, I say that, but if the right player was there, yeah, we would. But that would be for the long term. It is about the long term. It's not about getting in 1 year, not in the next, in 1 year out. We want to be there consistently. And, you look at a team like Toronto, they've been there 10 years in a row. They've, and then unfortunately they're out this year, but they probably want to get back in for the next 10 years, and we want to get in and have an extended run, and we want to do it the right way.
Your team, your top scorer finished with 45 points. Is it possible to be a playoff team without adding scoring at this point?
Well, it's to just add scoring. I mean, it's not that easy. We need more scoring from within first and foremost. I mean, guys can't, if you're on every power play, if you're on every, we're going to challenge all the guys that are there. That we need more from each and every one of them. I've challenged Frost already. He should be 60-point guy in this league, maybe 80. I mean, with the skill he has and what he does, and he shows me on nights that he can be a number one center, and then the inconsistency. So we're challenging all of them, and he's even challenging himself. I mean, if he was sitting here, he'd tell you the same thing. He's got to give more. 40 points is good. He's happy with 20 goals probably, but now we want him to be happy with 30 goals, and we're going to need to get more from each guy, especially the opportunities each and every guy gets. We're going to need some young guys. They did some good things. I saw some real progress, which is exciting, and then we're going to need to see more. And there's going to be growing pains next year. I don't expect the finished product from some of our young guys, but I want them to take another step. And for that to happen, would I love to have a 60, 70-point guy? Yeah, I would. Can I go find one out there? I would like to do that too. And if I could, we would grab that guy. And so we're going to, we're not going to leave any stone unturned. We're going to go and try to do whatever we can to help the team and make it better. But a lot of it is going to come from within. It's going to be young players taking another step, and the veteran players that are here to have, big years, to have Huberdeau back healthy next year. That's an important thing. We need him to be healthy and ready and back to where, he's feeling good about his game.
I know they all are, but when you have the draft capital that you have this year, I mean, can you look at this summer being a significant one in this franchise just because of, obviously you're going to have a top 6 pick and then all the other draft picks with it?
Yeah, I mean, every year it's important for a team in our situation building through the draft, developing. We want to do the right things. We don't want to rush the players. I mean, definitely there was talk about signing some of the guys we drafted a few years ago and maybe get them in turn to pro, or, what's the best for them though? We want to do the best for them long term. Like Eric said, it's not about just getting guys in here for 1 year and turning this thing around. It's, we want to do it the right way for the next 10 years.
With what you saw from your young players this season, especially down the stretch, and how valuable can that experience be for them moving forward?
Oh, I mean, it's huge. I mean, it gives everybody a glimpse, of what we're hoping they're going to be in the future. I thought Matt Fay had a great, even during my meeting, I think he might have said it to you guys, he thought his time in the American League served him well. He wasn't ready for the NHL yet early. And then he came back and you kind of saw the way he finished. And he's got expectations. Hey, I'm going to come back and start right. But it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. He's going to have a big summer. He's going to have to come back. Zane taking the steps that he did, along the way. There's going to be mistakes next year. I don't want to ever, and that's what I don't want to put the pressure on these young guys that they have to come in and save the team. But you have great leadership. You have guys, but it's that middle group, the Farabys, Frost, Coronado, Zari. We need those guys to take another step too. And, I think the guys that we brought in on those trades, whether it was, Strome, Matta, White Cloud, they really big part of what we did. So I know, people will say maybe when we make moves, we've already made moves. We brought in some good pieces and we've brought in players that we think we can help next, moving forward next year. And they're at good ages and they're under contract. So, I look at what we did at home, the 8-1-1 at the end here. I'm thinking we want to continue to do that next year, but how do we get better on the road? That was one of my questions to each and every guy. Are we doing something different on the road? Are we doing something when you talk to the coaches? What can we do differently on the road to change it? I know they get the matchups they want, but we need to find a way to be better on the road next year and continue to do what we did at home. And that's how you get better and you try to make the playoffs. I mean, those are the little things that you got to figure out. But it's not easy to pinpoint. Nobody had one answer. If we just do this in a row, we're going to win. It's going to take some time, and we're going to work through it with the coaches and, the rest of, the staff.
As you sit here today, do you feel good about those conversations? Obviously everyone's disappointed, everyone wants a little bit more, but as you talk and meet with all the players just about, how they see it moving forward.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I got out of, hey, is everybody's upset we're not in the playoffs this year. I mean, and that's a good thing. But I never saw them quit once. I didn't see them pout. They weren't, we had a lot of players coming and going. They were all pulling in the same direction. There was no quit in the team. They wanted to win every night. I know where people were like, oh, people were probably hoping we were going to lose. That's not pro hockey. We're not here to lose. We're here to win. And these guys are fighting for their jobs too. I mean, they want to prove, hey, we are NHL players and we want to be here. So, I never went down to the room. They weren't pouting or sulking or upset. They were positive. They were ready to play each game. And that's all you can really ask of them. Obviously, we were out of the playoffs. We had an E next to our name, which no one is happy about, but there was no quit in that room. So that's a positive, and that's the way we got to start next year.
I didn't see much of Ryan Lomberg down the stretch. He's obviously a UFA. Do you see his future being in?
I think we got to kind of take a couple days because everything's emotional now, reflect and see where we think this is going. We have a lot of players under contract right now, so we have to make sure, when you have players, there needs to be room to play too, and I don't know. As we move towards the draft, are there trades made? Like we said, there's opportunity. We have lots of picks. If there's players that we feel we can get, there might be players going out. You never know. I mean, that's the bad part about, you can't just say, hey, yep, we're going to do this or that. You got to kind of see where it goes over the next couple months.
I know obviously the Wranglers didn't have a great year, but broadly speaking, how do you feel about, I guess, your prospect pool and the state of the developmental system right now?
I think Ray and the developmental staff, they do, the one thing I love was when the young players talk about the staff and how much they get from them, how important they are, and they feel like they're the number one priority. Each guy says they're the number one priority, which tells me our guys are doing the right things. You know, whether it's watching video, calling them after games, making sure they're doing the right things. You know, that's a positive. So Ray and his staff have done an amazing job with the development side, you know, and the Wranglers. It's always tough because what we've done is we've taken a lot of players away from them, you know, so I think, you know, maybe the record isn't there, but the growth of young players down there has been good, you know, but when you take all those defensemen and you continue to take players and forwards, you know, it's going to be tough. We don't have that type of depth in the organization because a lot of them are in college and junior and, you know, playing overseas. So, but we feel like the young players we've had, they've all had a good year. They had a good year. We're excited with, you know, I could go name by name, but we have so many, and, you know, they've all taken a step and they've been a real good player in whatever league they've played in.
And I know, obviously, you know, you've graduated some players, you're getting some players up from college and from other sources the next year or two. I know you guys had a good 3-4 year run with the Wranglers when they arrived in town, with sort of being a competitive environment for players, fighting for ice time and fighting for recalls. Do you think you're close to sort of replicating that next year and going forward in terms of the competitiveness down there?
Yeah, you know, with guys that we feel they're going to graduate from whether it's college or junior next year, and obviously we haven't even made the draft, you know, we're going to need some room to be able to play them in the American League and the NHL. So I do feel like, you know, we're going to have a deeper team probably than we had. You know, we just took so many players this year. We've made more trades, you know, bringing players in, bringing players up. We had a lot of players on the roster at the end of the year with the team. So I do think, you know, the plan's always safe because it is important to win down there too. Developing is the most important thing, but we also, with that, we want to win games. So I think we're going to, you know, we'll have some veterans down there, but another influx of young players that will be coming for sure.
Asking you so much about your plans for the summer, how much does what happens on May 5th at the draft lottery sort of impact all of it?
You know, I mean, I think the draft lottery is an exciting time for sure. Everybody wants the first overall pick. Everybody in that draft lottery wants it. And we're all just like we want to make the playoffs. We want to win every night. We want to win the draft lottery. That's the way we are, with the way we're built. But we're going to get a very good player, 1 to 6. I'm not, you know, I was thinking about it last night during the game. Like, I've been out scouting. I'm very excited about top 6 players because I know we're going to be one of those. So I know exactly who in my mind. I don't know who they'll be because you don't know who the other team's like and who. But if we get one of the top 6 players in that draft, I'm going to be very happy. And I think the people here are going to be very happy. Of course, they want number 1. I get Calgary wants number 1, but you know, Matthew Tkachuk was number 6. Sean Monahan was number 6. You know, I take either of those guys any day, you know. So I'm not stressed about it. I know everybody else seemed to be stressed about it, but you know, the thing that I liked is probably our players thought, I wonder if they want to lose. No, we want to win. We want to win every night. We want to build a culture. I mean, I think when Rick Bowness kind of came out and said what he said, I agree with what he said. You know, I don't know about his team, what he said, but I listened to what he said and heard the words, and I didn't feel that way about my group and our group, you know. And the coaches prepared every day to win. They didn't, no excuses, you know. And I thought that's the culture we talk about here. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but for a team that's 4th, you know, going to pick 4th if we stay where we are, it's not good enough. But nobody gave up, and that's all I can ask.
How important was Ryan Huska to that?
Yeah, he's the lead of that. I mean, he's the one. It starts with Ryan in that room, and it goes down through, you know, with his coaching staff, and then it goes right to the trainers, you know, equipment, medical, Ricky and his staff, Sean O'Brien. I mean, you know what? We have amazing people down there. So it's one of those where the results aren't there, and we get, you know, myself included. I'm not happy with the job I've done. I mean, I know where we want to be and where we're trying to get to. So I understand this is not good enough and unacceptable, and I'm going to try to do a better job. And I think they all want to do a better job, you know.
Last season you finished with 96 points, time for most in NHL history by a non-playoff team. 96 points would have won the Pacific Division this season. And you had a very similar team to start the year. If your goal is to make the playoffs next season, what has to happen in order for that to happen?
I think the first thing is we can't get off to a start like that. We need to have a good start. We need to get off to a good start, and we need guys that are here on this team right now to step up. We couldn't score any goals at the beginning of last year. Our specialty teams were not good to start the year. We're not a team, we don't have a 135-point player. We're not going to have a 135-point player. So we're going to have to do it by committee, but we're going to have to get more out of each guy. We're going to have to get more. 40 is not good enough. We're going to need to have at least a 60, 70-point guy. We're going to have more power play is going to have to be better. I did see some promising things, the way they were moving the puck around. We need to have a better power play. A penalty kill was good at times. We had some tough stretches, but that happens during the year. But special teams is going to be huge. Goaltending is going to be huge. We have 2 really good goaltenders. So I feel very comfortable there. And we're going to need all those guys, like the Oli Matas, like the White Clouds, Baller, and our young guys to perform, and be good right from the beginning. And we're not going to have the luxury to have a lot of nights off. We're going to have to be good most nights. We're going to have bad games, but we're going to have to be competitive and believe we can win each night. And that's going to take the whole group, not just 1 or 2 lines or a couple defensemen.
Greg, I don't know what your good luck charm is for May 5th, but if you're not in the top 3, is there a temptation to move into the top 3?
If I could, it's always interesting because, yeah, you'd love to be in the top 3 for sure. But with that said, like I said, you're going to get a very good player in the 6, and you don't know who's going to take who, and that's even the year I think we got Matthew Tkachuk. I actually didn't think we were going to get Matthew. I thought we were going to get a different player, but just the way, hey, somebody took somebody that they didn't believe, and then all of a sudden, Matthew was there for us, and it was perfect. So, I think going in, everybody has what they need or what they want or who they think is the best player, and it's probably not going to be the same. There's going to be no team that we're all going to be the same. So, but you always want to win. If we can win the lottery, that'd be amazing. But if we end up 6, we're going to get a very good player also.
There's a predecessor used to talk about how prospects and draft picks were like lottery tickets. The more tickets you had, the better chances to win the lottery. But how do you weigh quality over quantity? Because you've got 11 picks in this draft. Is it more important to have more lottery tickets or better lottery tickets, for a lack of a better way to say it?
Well, I think we target players, so if there's an opportunity, if we like a player at 20 and we need to use the Vegas pick and something else to move up to 20, we're trying to go after certain players for sure. And we're trying to move. I mean, last year we were trying to move up at the draft. You're always at different times, not always going to work. Teams, hey, we have a player we like. If that guy's still there, we're not going to move. So there's all those things. So we really, I really grind the scouts that, hey, we want, if we make all these picks, each and every pick is a guy we believe in, and we want to put a Flaming Sea jersey on him. That's what it's all about. And if we move, but when you have all these picks, you have the opportunity to maybe move up and get a guy you really, okay, hey, he's still there, we can go do it. So we're just going to look at whatever we feel is the best player at the time. Todd and his staff. It's an exciting time now to getting ready for that when you go to get to meet the kids at the combine. And then we'll know exactly where we sit, what pick we're going to be. And, then you start talking to teams, hey, are you willing to move if and when? And then you'll have a better understanding of what it's going to be like come draft time.
There's a lot of talk, about that top of this draft, how good it is. Mm-hmm. But the rest of the draft and all the picks you have, do you think, there's an opportunity to get a later round guy like Gridden who can come into the lineup?
Absolutely,
right away?
Yeah. I'm excited. There's some players down where we think might be later to the end of the first, into the second, that would be exciting players to get, And it's all just because of maybe everyone's going to have different players at that point, but there's some very good players that we feel very comfortable with, later in the draft. And even in later, even, in your 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, there's always guys that people target and say, hey, he's a little underrated. This is a guy we should target later in the draft.
In terms of positives this year, can you give me a list of 3 or 4 things that were very positive in terms of moving forward with this organization?
I think interesting. Probably Devin Cooley comes to mind. I thought, him kind of solidified himself as an NHL goalie and what he's done, and the tandem with him and Wolf, very positive for us moving forward. I did think our young guys coming in, and especially down the stretch, showing us glimpses at times what the future holds for them. Trying to think if there's probably more kind of caught me off guard there. I think when you're where we are in the standings, sometimes I've probably been focusing on more of the negative stuff, but definitely the team, the no quit, down the stretch, where I went down there yesterday, I'm thinking I'm being I was pouting a little myself, like not happy, end of the season, pissed off the way things have gone and where we sit. But I went down there, hey, they were ready. Sergeyev was going to play. They're pumped. They're going to win for him. They had a good attitude. I remember walking up, I'm like, this is going to be a good game tonight. I mean, I know LA needs it, but I said, I feel like we're going to win this one. And sure enough, we did. And they did it for the guys. They all care about each other, and they have each other's backs. And, that's important for the team, especially when you're out of the playoffs.
Jumping off of Eric's question, you mentioned the young guys. I'm going to put you on the spot a bit. How many, new NHLers did you discover that you didn't know were going to be able to play at that level consistently in the past?
Well, I think the one good thing is you get an opportunity to see guys, like Hunter coming in and playing. And I really, even last game, I thought he had a great game last game. The way he's moving his puck, the way he's kind of figuring out what he can do and how he's going to be able to play at the NHL level. I think that's a big step, to see Tyson Gross come in, to see Weeb come in, and it's hard. I mean, I feel for Weeb because he's coming in, no practice, nothing, and he's got to play, but I thought he looked much more comfortable the last game, so, that's what you're getting an opportunity to do, is see players when you're in our situation and have them actually, when I think it was Ryan put Gross out on the 5-on-3 to win the draw. That tells me he trusts him. He wants him out there and he believes in him. And that's great for a young guy, for a guy that's as a college free agent that we brought in. And he did really well. And each of those guys I thought got better with more games. So instead of just getting one game where it happens sometimes, they got to play 3 or 4 or 5 games. And you could tell they got much more comfortable, and the coaches got much more comfortable with them. And that's really the key. It's not for me to say. The coach makes the decision who's going to play and who's going to be out in those things. And I think they were gaining his trust. Zane, Matvey, Hunter, all those guys really did a great job. And now, again, we're starting fresh when we come back in September, and they got to make a team and earn a spot. And it's going to be competitive. And even our veterans are going to feel that push too, because they saw how good these young guys played.
Take 2 more questions.
You traded away your top 2 defensemen and your number 1 centerman. Good players, but also guys who wore letters for this team. How pleasantly surprised were you with Ryan Strome coming in as a veteran and a guy who produced, as well as Zach Whitecloud and Oli Mata, who had big shoes to fill there?
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about those guys. I mean, I told them they exceeded what my expectations were coming in. The one thing I felt, especially the last 2 guys, when we made Strome and Mata, when I talked to Mata, because he had to waive his no trade to come, his thing was, I want an opportunity. I want to play. Am I going to get an opportunity? I said, you're going to get to play. And you're going to get to play a lot. So I think when he came in, he loved it. He said, I'm a hockey player. I want to play. And, and as well as he played, I really felt watching him, he was excellent. And then same with Strome. Strome said, hey, I've been healthy scratched. I have something to give Craig. I love the game. I can't wait to he wanted to get here the same day. We couldn't get him a flight for him, but, he was ready to go. So, for those 2 guys to come in and do what they did and really produce, and the way I saw him work with the young guys and kind of mentoring them, especially as guys that just got here, pretty impressive. And honestly, Zach came in and right from day one, he just played so well. And wanted to be a part of, see what he did in the community early on. He just felt like he was seamless, and his leadership was second to none. So to have all three of those guys come in, I thought we didn't miss a beat, and they really exceeded expectations.
Coleman is a guy who a lot of people thought would be dealt at the deadline. He's been a total pro, and I don't want to imply otherwise anyway, but he might be a guy, only so much time left on his contract, might be a guy who would want to go to a playoff team, potentially. What have conversations been like with him, and do you want him around?
Yeah, Blake and I talked. I love Blake, and Blake, the one thing, I think he made it clear that he'd like to stay. If he'd like to stay, he'd like a contract extension. That would be the ideal thing. Obviously, that's his perfect world. We got to try to go through what we're doing and see where we're at. But Blake's a leader in this team. Blake's a huge part of it, So I don't want to say we're going to trade him. We're not going to trade him. You do need good people. We do, we've traded a lot of people away, and not saying we're not going to make trades, because again, we are going to do what's best for the organization, what's best for the team moving forward. But if it's to keep Blake and give Blake an extension, we'll do that. If it's to trade Blake, if that's the best thing, we'll have to look at that too. So I don't want to say either way. I don't want to put myself in pigeonhole myself a little bit here, but this guy is an unbelievable pro, great person. You're never, if he's a Calgary Flames till he retires, I would be excited to have him here because he's such a good player and good person.